Hello, students. Let us start today with the next section of your third unit in the previous class of your English CB course book. We have discussed the first section of your third unit, which was your advisory for Indian students in the United States. Today, let us see the next chapter of this particular unit, which is Interpreter of Maladies. All right. So it's basically a story full of humor, fun, and many things to learn about from this chapter. This chapter is written by, if you flip on the page to page number 89, you'll get the name of the author, which is Jhumpa Lahiri. Okay, so actually she was born in London, okay, in England, and to a Bengali couple. Formerly, they were earlier from Kolkata. Okay, her formal name was Nilanjana Sudeshna, but she was called Jhumka at home, a name which was popularized by her teachers and which she retained even after gaining fame as a writer. She earned 3 literary master's degree at Boston University, US, before completing her doctorate. Her first book, a collection of 9 stories, and also Interpreter of Maladies, won the Pulitzer Prize, and her first novel, that is The Namesake, was adapted into a film directed by Meera Nair, starring Irfan Khan and Tabu, in which Lahiri also appeared as Aunt Jhumpa. Lahiri's second collection of short stories, An Accustomed Earth, reached number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list, and Lahiri's writing is inspired by her own experiences as well as those of her parents, friends, and acquaintances of the Bengali community. She knows so well. Now, Lahiri is currently a member of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, appointed by the former US President Barack Obama, and is also a professor of creative writing at Princeton University. So, as I told you, that this is also one of her fine writings. So let us see what is this all about. It's a little lengthy as compared to the earlier chapters. So no worries, we shall do it in half, okay, in 2 parts. So let us discuss half of the chapter today, and the remaining half we will discuss in the next class. So let us start with this. This particular chapter, The Interpreter of the Maladies, okay, is basically about a day during an Indian American's family's vacation in India and visiting these various tourist sites with their Indian guide. Now it so happened that on this summer day, this particular tourist, Mr. and Mrs. Das, a young Indian couple, they were born in US, United States, and their 3 children, that is Ronnie, Bobby, and Tina. Okay, if you read the text, you'll come to know. And also, as well as they had an Indian guide named Mr. Kapasi. Now, Mr. Kapasi traveled by car to the Sun Temple at Konark. Now, this story is basically set on their journey towards the Sun Temple for a visit. Now, when they stopped at the roadside tea stall for refreshments, this middle-aged guide, that is Mr. Kapasi, observes the young family. Now, though the family is of Indian origin, Indian heritage, but their manner, their attire, their interactions are American. And when Mrs. Das purchases a snack from a shirtless vendor, and this shirtless vendor sings a popular Hindi love song to her, okay, but she does not understand the language and expresses no embarrassment. In fact, during the ride to the temple, the Das family engages in mindless activity. Tina plays with the door lock, the 2 boys snap their chewing gum, Mrs. Das paints her fingernails in boredom, right? And Mr. Das tinkers with his camera, and Mr. Kapasi observes all of them. Now, Mrs. Das converses with Mr. Kapasi, and learns that he has another job as a translator for a physician and his Gujarati patients. Okay, that is the next secondary job of Mr. Kapasi. Now, after when Mrs. Das got to know about this, then intrigued with Kapas's descriptions of this job, Mrs. Das questions him further. Mrs. Das' interest sparks in Kapasi a kind of a infatuation towards her, and Kapasi notices Mrs. Das' sensuous appearance. Now, this particular group, as they were heading towards the temple, they stops for lunch, after which the children leave the picnic table and Mr. Das photographs his wife and also Kapasi together. Now, Mrs. Das asks Kapasi for his address so she can later send him a copy of the photo, and he writes it on a scrap of paper which she places in her handbag. Silently, Kapasi dreams how this photograph could be the beginning of an correspondence between both of them. Now, this dream continues in his mind throughout the day, and at the midday, when they reach the ruins of the Sun Temple, now whose this exterior walls are covered with sculpted. Now, before reaching this, actually in this chapter, you will find that as they were heading towards the Sun Temple, all the instances that had happened along with them on the midway, the discussions between Mr. and Mrs. Das and also Kapasi, the way Mr. and Mrs. Das behaved, and also their 3 children, the different sort of behavior that they did, and this Mr. Kapasi being a silent observer. At the same time, the car, since in India, in India the cars, the steering of the cars are on the right hand side, whereas in US it's on the left hand side. So when these children, they were repeatedly asking question about the vehicle, and it so happened once in the midway that Mr. Kapasi, in order to save some money, save some fuel, he did not switch on the AC of his car, and in addition to which Mrs. Das was not at all happy, after getting to know that the AC of the car doesn't work. But whereas Mr. Kapasi, it was just a story. It was just a kind of a created story by Mr. Kapasi, but in reality nothing such sort of thing happened. So as they were traveling, as they were heading towards this Konark, the Sun Temple, in Konark, so Mr. Kapasi, in between, when he saw that the way they behave, Mr. Das and Mrs. Das, so Mr. Kapasi found it strange. In fact, the way Mr. Das spoke with his wife, Mrs. Kapasi thought that Mr. Das should refer to his wife by her first name when speaking to the little girl. And this Tina, as I told you, they had 3 children. Tina also pointed to where Mrs. Das was purchasing something from one of the shirtless men, as I told you, from a tea stall, where this fellow, Mr. Kapasi, heard that tea stall singing a song to impress Mrs. Das, but she did not give any kind of attention, as she did not understand. There was no reaction, and then she walked slowly, carrying all those puffed rice, those peanuts, chili peppers, stuffed with everything. And then as they began their journey, there was a discussion started between. Now Mr. Kapasi turned to Mr. Das and said like where in America do you live? So unusual, a general talk happened between Mr. Kapasi and Mr. Das. They were exchanging their dialogue. You can refer to dialogue in page number 87. Within the inverted commas, the conversation or the dialogue exchange is being mentioned. And as they were heading, the road towards the Konark were very poor. It's our Indian roads, most of them, how is the condition of the road. And the distance that they had to cover was of 52 miles. So Mr. Kapasi was explaining everything about the journey, and Mr. Das just nodded. He was busy with his camera strap, where it had began to, he began to rub against, and it was irritating. It was irritating his back, then back of his neck. So today I will keep it here. If you could see, we have explained up to page number 87, the last line. Okay, Mr. Das nodded, readjusting the camera strap where it had began to chafe the back of his neck. So in the next class, we shall discuss the 2 more pages that is left for this chapter. Please go through this up till page number 87. Read the text from page number 84 to 87. And in case if you have any doubt, kindly get back to me.